Thank you. My book is titled A Colonial Affair, Commerce, Conversion, and Scandal in French India. And it's a book about a few big issues, namely the nature of empire, global projects of conversion, and transnational trade in a period of fierce competition. And how these three projects, colonialism, conversion, and making money, were in a state of symbiotic yet profound conflict. But it's also a book about a man named Nanaka, who was a Tamil commercial broker in the French colony of Pondicherry in India early in the 18th century. And my task today is to show you how it is that these large-scale processes and the details of one man's rise, fall, and subsequent rise, examined together, reveal the central argument that this book makes, that French empire in the East was characterized by a disagreement about the ultimate goals of the imperial project, and as a result, deployed what I term distributed authority, a kind of authority in which men like Nanaka had a very important role to play. I'm going to start by telling you a story in three parts. At the beginning of my story, the year is 1714, and 3 ships from Nantes have arrived in the port of the colony of Pondicherry on the Coromandel coast of India. And the scribe of this ship kept a very detailed journal of their far-flung voyage to bring back cloth to consumers in France. And that's how we know about the astounding scene that greeted them when they arrived in India. The entire town was engulfed in a wedding celebration, which drew in French government officials, traders, military folks, as well as Indian merchants, weavers, other textile workers, and a total of 10,000 guests in this one wedding. This lavish celebration involved displays of fireworks, processions in the streets with elephants, religious rites, feasts, and performances with dancing girls, including one performance that actually took place in the home of the French commander of the fort of Pondicherry. The marriage that this extraordinary party celebrated was that of the eldest son of a man named Nanaka, the chief commercial broker of the French trading company in India. And as this very awestruck account of the French scribe demonstrates, he was not only the most powerful Tamil man in the town, but one of the most powerful residents, period. Now, let's move forward in time. It's only 2 years later in 1716, and now Nanaka, this powerful man, is alone in a prison cell on the waterfront in Pondicherry. In fact, in the very same fort commanded by the man whose wedding was celebrated 2 years prior to that. For many days, Nanaka doesn't even know why he's being held in this prison cell. He's kept alone. And when he's finally brought into the interrogation room, again and again on 7 different occasions, the man who interrogates him, the French governor of the colony, doesn't speak to him in the language that they had shared for their long and very fruitful association, Portuguese, a language in which both men were fluent, but instead insists on asking him his questions in French through a translator, who then poses the questions in Tamil to Nanaka, who answers back, so that true communication cannot take place. When the court finally makes a decision, Nanaka is convicted of the crimes of tyranny and sedition, and he's subjected to a very public form of humiliation. He's flogged in the public bazaar before the people whose life he held so much influence over before. His vast wealth is stripped from him. His sons, including the son whose marriage was celebrated so recently, are banished in perpetuity from Pondicherry, and Nanaka himself is sentenced to serve a 3-year prison sentence, but he never does, because a few months later, he dies in his prison cell under somewhat mysterious circumstances. Now, if I stop this story here, it would not be too surprising to students of empire, right? A local indigenous subject manages to acquire some power and authority. The colonial regime is very quick to undercut that power to demonstrate its control over bodies and souls of colonized subjects. But this isn't where this particular story stops. Now I'd like to take you to the final chapter of this narrative. 3 more years have passed. It's 1720, and we're in Paris, in the private chapel of the royal family, the Palais Royal, in the historic heart of the city. And now a young Tamil man is kneeling to embrace Christianity. And his godfather is Philippe d'Orléans, the regent of France, the uncle of Louis XV. And this young man is Nanyapa's eldest son, Guru Vapa, the same man whose wedding had been so lavishly celebrated 6 years prior to that. A few weeks later, the same man undergoes another transformation, even more shocking, I think. He's made a knight of a noble French order, and he's now styled the Chevalier Charles-Philippe Louis Guru Vapa. His trip to Paris, what brought him there, was a phenomenally successful attempt to restore his father's name, reputation, and fortune. And thanks to a global network of support in Pondichéry, Paris, and the French port town of Saint-Malo, Nanyapa's son then returned to Pondichéry triumphant, filling the same position that his father had previously filled, that of chief commercial broker to the company, and very quickly shed the trappings of Christianity. The French governor, the same man who had interrogated Nanyapa prior to his conviction, on the other hand, is removed from office and sent back to France in shackles. So the story of the Nanyapa affair, the details of it, form the narrative heart of this book. And it's clearly a story of dramatic reversal, right? It's a good yarn. But this event also structured the politics of the colony for more than a decade, a period in which participants in both France and India were entirely consumed by the fate of Nanyapa and the details of the Nanyapa affair early in the 18th century. So this affair involved a very diverse group of actors, including French company officials, both in Versailles and in Pondichéry, Catholic missionaries of 3 different orders and their superiors in Paris, and a group of local Tamil intermediaries, some of them commercial brokers like Nanyapa, others catechists or religious interpreters who assisted the Catholic missionaries in their work, and some of them linguistic interpreters, with important overlap between these 3 categories of go-betweens. As French traders, Catholic missionaries, and Tamil intermediaries debated and fought over the details of the Nanyapa affair and produced a large documentary trace of their efforts for or against Nanyapa, they were doing something that had broader significance than the fate of one man. They were articulating and contesting the very meaning of French empire and trying and failing to arrive at a shared vision of what this empire was meant to achieve. The fact that they failed to achieve such a vision was both the cause of the Nanyapa affair and a result of it. So this book is trying to do 2 things. It's intervening in some big debates and telling a highly specific narrative account of an event, and to make them into one thing. So let me try to explain how these 2 things connect. So the first part makes a large argument about the nature of European imperialism. In this, I'm intervening in a scholarship on empire and colonialism that has been fundamentally shaped by the fact that it came into being as a field of analysis as a study of the history of the British Empire, and particularly the British Empire of the 19th century. Now, given this fact, it's scholarship that took the British Raj as a paradigmatic example, and with that came a set of assumptions about how imperial agendas were necessarily hegemonic, and imperial methods were therefore measured in accordance to their success or failure to achieve the kind of domination that the British Raj achieved at its heyday. The French example in India reveals to us a different kind of colonialism, one that due to particular political and economic circumstance mostly, namely those of French weakness, had a different set of agendas. This was not, of course, because it was a kinder or gentler form of colonialism, but simply because it was adapted to a situation in which hegemony was neither desirable nor achievable. What was much more desirable was entry into existing Indian Ocean networks in which men like Nanyapa played a very important role. An example of how this kind of colonialism enacted itself lies in the very fact that Nanyapa himself, a Hindu, was appointed to the role that he filled despite the very vehement objections of missionaries in the town. So if one part of my effort has to do with interventions into the categories of analysis in my field, the study of empire, the second bit has to do with methodology, or the fact that I'm trying to make this argument through the medium of an extremely fine-grained analysis of a particular event, a methodology historians call microhistory. Now, for a very long time, I resisted writing this book as a microhistory. In fact, this book started life as a dissertation, which was not written as a microhistory and was not about the Nanaka Affair. It was conceptualized in much more general terms about colonial mediation. Nanaka and the Nanaka Affair were one case study among many. My resistance to writing this book as a microhistory was both pragmatic and theoretical. It was pragmatic because I thought I couldn't get a job if I write a microhistory, because I think historians largely misunderstand the methodology of microhistory. And it was theoretical because I myself largely shared in this misunderstanding of what a microhistory was. Now, from its origin among Italian historians in the 1970s, with by far the most famous example being Carlo Ginzburg's The Cheese and the Worms, which is a book about the belief systems held by a 16th century Italian miller, all the way to the current moment where I think there's a recent resurgence of the method in what we can call global microhistory, or an attempt to move microhistory beyond its origins in early modern European history and to introduce it into the recent global turn. Microhistory was never merely about the study of small or insignificant things or about rescuing forgotten actors or forgotten tales. What microhistory actually is a variation of scale. It's about a play of shifting hierarchies of analyses. When a microhistory succeeds, what it does is not shed light on a broader context or phenomenon, which is what a case study does. What the fine-bore scale of analysis does instead is make visible things which are not discernible in different scales of analysis or on a different scale, and as a result, are able to bring about a paradigmatic shift. So, to return to the Nanaka Affair, the language of the French crown and much of the archival remnants of French empire was one that claimed that the projects of commerce and conversion were both a shared effort for glory of king, state, and Catholicism. The intense fracturing of opinion and action in the Nanaka Affair, traders against missionaries, traders in Pondichéry against traders in France, Jesuit missionaries against Capuchin missionaries, and they could go on in a seemingly never-ending Russian doll of conflict, is what makes visible the conflicted reality of French colonialism, and more generally, the existence of a register of rule, that of distributed authority of imperial sovereignty. Thank you.